If someone were to ask you what you did last Thursday, would you be able to tell them? How about the Tuesday before that, or the Wednesday before that? When I was asked this question 6 years ago, I, like many of you, could not remember. Why, at the ripe young age of 16 years old, could I not remember what I had done just a few days prior? I was in some of the most formative years of my life, and it felt like it was blurring by. I was fortunate enough to have undergone a wide array of life experiences that shaped me into the person I am today. By the time I turned 16 in 2017, I'd experienced a pretty uprooting move from the East to the West Coast and had traveled to 30 countries and 20 states in my early years. When I tried to remember events that defined moments like those, I could only remember small snippets of the best moments. I could not remember the smaller, sometimes more intimate moments that I believe really contributed to my growth as a person. The numerous plane rides, small chats with locals, and the exploration of new foods and cultures were all part of a gap in memory that made me incredibly sad. I soon realized that this was not only a problem with once-in-a-lifetime events, but with the day-to-day moments of life that I believe really contributed to my growth as a person. To remedy this conundrum, I vowed to write everything I did every single day for 1 year. These entries include a 2 to 3 sentence summary of the general outline of my day, and typically include what I ate, what I did, who I saw, and sometimes how I felt. I like to keep these entries relatively objective and save my more emotional outpourings for another document. Prom, graduation, family deaths, and trips across the globe were documented, but so were doctor's appointments, days in bed, and walks around the block. I wanted to document as much of my life as I could, regardless of how interesting or memorable I considered it to be. Since January 1st, 2017, I have managed to create an almost 300-page document that I add to every single day and look back upon from time to time again to see just how far I've come. 6 years later, I have yet to stop and see no end in sight. Because of my extensive documentation, I was able to become hyper-aware of my bad habits and break some of them. Like any teenage girl, I loved boba. For a 6-month period at the end of my senior year of high school, I religiously visited a boba shop every single day for a sugary boba drink as a quick after-school stress reliever. At the end of this 6-month period, I had gained close to 15 pounds, was incredibly unhappy, and had a mild addiction to sugar. I was in denial that I had a problem, and it wasn't until I looked back on my memories 2 months later when I realized I had inevitably fallen into an unhealthy predicament. Reading back on my memories made me precisely aware of a bad habit I had fallen into, ultimately leading me to recover from this bad habit and avoid sugary drinks for the next few months. I know that if I had not had this extensive documentation, I would have been in denial for much longer than I actually was. Accountability with setting and maintaining goals was one of the major byproducts of my daily memory taking. Due to the very nature of this documentation, I could no longer make excuses for not reaching certain goals I set for myself. For example, when I initially wanted to shed a few pounds after my sugar addiction, I failed to do so and wasn't honest with myself as to why nothing was changing. I was in denial that I had a problem, and I realized that I had fallen into an unhealthy predicament. Reading back on my memories helped me see a bad habit that I had inadvertently fallen into, leading me to see that eating out with friends every day, while fun, was holding me back from reaching long-term goals I had set for myself when I recognized I had a problem. This retrospection set me on the right track, and I eventually came to terms with what I needed to do to reach my goal. I am a psychology and brain sciences student here at UC Santa Barbara, and it would be uncharacteristic of me not to mention a theory that supports my documentation habit. Scientists at Northwestern University in Chicago have found that our memory works like a game of telephone. Every time you seek to recount an event that has occurred, your brain alters itself. Instead of remembering the event from when it actually occurred, your brain remembers the event from when you remembered it last time. After each subsequent recollection, the actual memory becomes vulnerable to new information that is capable of permanently warping the true memory itself. Making sure I stuck to writing down my memories every day was important to avoid creating false memories. Like any habit you're trying to form, going from nothing to dedicating those 5 minutes at the end of every night to memory recollection was hard to do. With the help of reminders from my phone and pictures I took throughout the day, I was able to create this habit of documentation, and I have kept it up in the last 6 years. After starting this habit, I soon realized that those 5 minutes I dedicated to memory recollection at the end of every day gave my life a new sense of structure that became especially important on days that were more chaotic or more tiring than others. I recognize that committing to doing something every single day may seem daunting. I'm here to tell you to take it day by day. When I first started my journey in 2017, I remember just how hard it was to commit to this memory recollection every night. But as I did everything in my power to make sure this habit started, the habit did eventually form and has stuck by me in the last 6 years. 66 days. It takes, on average, 66 days for a behavior to become a habit. Set alarms, will yourself to remember, and most importantly, make it fun. Don't think of memory taking as a chore, but as a way to document your life for your future self. Scientists have found that repeating enjoyable behaviors when dopamine is present strengthens the habit as your brain seeks the dopamine it felt when it initially performed the task. The longer you document your days, the more you will begin to gain a better understanding of your life as it stands, and see what other behaviors or habits you may want to start to reach your full potential. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, the reality of just how repetitious life can be truly began to set in. Meeting new people and experiencing new things became especially hard as I, like many of you, was confined to the walls of my bedroom every single day for hours as quarantine dragged on. Remember how I talked about how my documentation gave my life a new sense of structure? I cannot reiterate enough just how important this sense of structure became in the midst of the pandemic. The figurative structure I created in the 3 years prior to the pandemic supported me and arguably saved my mental health as I began to ruminate on the purposes of life like any other angsty teenage girl. As the world as I knew it slowly began to fade away, as the weeks of quarantine turned into months, I began to cherish the narrative I created in the 3 years prior to the pandemic hitting. I know that it can be hard sometimes to view life from a bigger picture perspective. For example, every so often I feel like my life is over when I do particularly poorly on an exam or get into a minor fender bender. The small, sometimes annoying parts of life became amplified during the pandemic, as those were the only parts of life that were captivating my attention in the routine of the day to day. I was beginning to grow frustrated, sad, and felt like I was going to be stuck in this routine for the rest of my life. Reading back on my memories helped me see the bigger picture perspective of life, and that this new normal that was demonizing my life was a temporary state that I will ultimately look back upon as a phase of growth during times of uncertainty. All humans hate uncertainty and will do everything in their power to minimize it. I found that during the COVID-19 pandemic, my extensive documentation did just that. Seeing the bigger picture, or seeing life over a span of a few days instead of over a span of a few years instead of over a span of a few days or weeks, reduced the anxiety I was feeling about the future and about the present. I told myself a few bad days or weeks does not define my life, and reminded myself that it was important to remain calm in this time of overwhelming anxiety. Seeing the bigger picture is also known as psychological distancing by some psychologists. These psychologists have found that there are benefits to being able to see the bigger picture. For example, psychological distancing is a key factor in mediating self-control. The psychological distancing I learned through my daily memories inadvertently taught me to have better self-control with the day-to-day decisions I was making in my life. Having a stronger sense of self-control through my daily memory documentation also taught me to forego temporary temptations for more long-term goals, such as choosing to study for longer instead of watching YouTube. With each passing day, more and more memories are created and stored in your brain. Not only have I learned so much from starting this habit, but I look forward to the day when I can show my children and my grandchildren what my life was like during my formative years. I have grown more cognizant of the way I spend my time and seek to find the joy in the nuances of the day-to-day, whether that be deviating from my usual running route or setting my alarm 10 minutes earlier to meditate from time to time. In today's society, it is so easy to lose yourself in the blur of the fast-paced world we live in. Especially for those of you who work a monotonous 9-to-5 job with little day-to-day variance, it can be hard to differentiate how each day is unique and worth remembering. In the last 6 years I have found that even with little day-to-day variance, it is important to incorporate something new to each passing day to break up the sameness of each day. Something new does not have to be a grand event or chore, but rather something small that can contribute something positive to your life. Using a different type of milk with your coffee or switching up the playlist you listen to on your way to work can help you break away from the habitual cycle many people grow tired of. The more I documented my days, the more I realized how vital variance is to how I view life and to what motivates me to wake up in the morning. I looked forward to the small changes I was going to make to the next day and became excited to live each day differently from the day before. While I am currently in some of the most formative years of my life as a fourth-year undergraduate here at UC Santa Barbara, I recognize that for some people, especially for those of you who are past your, quote, formative years, life may start to look a little black and white. This is why I urge you to find the extraordinary in the mundane by documenting what you do every single day to see how each day is fundamentally different from the last. I promise you'll find something. Thank you.